What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we are here with just that, some Detroit Lions news. However, we are back for all the wrong reasons. We had an injury update today of a player that we didn't hear anything about yesterday, at least I did not. And this morning, when this news popped up, I was like, okay, we should probably do a show on this, even if it's just a short, quick show. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with the Lions' latest video. I hate to be back for this reason because I feel like we did something very similar last season as well. We probably did when the injury happened. But today, it was reported that cornerback Emmanuel Moseley suffered a torn pec in practice yesterday and now will be out indefinitely. And that was reported by Adam Schefter this morning. So I had heard nothing of this yesterday. I don't think any of us did. That would have been a conversation yesterday, but find out this morning that that was the case. And of course, this goes alongside with the other injuries that we're waiting for updates on. Kevin Zeitler with the shoulder injury, Terran Arnold getting evaluated for a concussion, and then also having Sam Laporta not practice, even though that one seems like it's going to be okay. But this now adds to that list. However, this one is super unfortunate. Of course, just knowing Emmanuel Moseley's background, the amount of injuries that he's been through. What I was able to find, at least at the NFL level, I don't think he's ever had like a torn pectoral injury. Also, I'm not sure how serious it is. Like, is it fully torn? Is this something that's going to take like the 6 months of rehab to get back from plus surgery? Is it minor tear where he could get back a lot sooner than that? We did get a sense of what that could look like last season. Everybody's different, but CD Deuce last season, week 2 against Seattle, had a torn pec, got surgery less than a week later, and he returned for week 18, the finale of the Lions season, and he performed in all of the playoff games. So we did get to see him again that season. It was just a long time in between before he got back. The positive here for Emmanuel Moseley, even if it's a similar timeline, it happened before the first preseason game, so you would essentially get some extra weeks, essentially getting an extra month here for Emmanuel Moseley to get back to things. So if it's a similar timeline, maybe you get him back by the second half of the season, like week 12, 13, you're hoping for something along those lines, because CD Deuce had returned to practice in December. But man, I absolutely hate this news. And Emmanuel Moseley was getting a lot of the starting slot reps for the Lions. Then yesterday, we hear Dan Campbell talk about Ify in that role, which now seems like an absolute possibility of him getting some looks there as the Lions' big nickel, just kind of putting that label to it, just like C.J. Gardner-Johnson did back when he was with the New Orleans Saints. So this is horrible news. Like I said, looking back at his NFL career, I don't think he's ever had an injury like this, but of course he had the back-to-back torn ACLs, he's had concussions, knee strains, ankle sprain, those not as long, just a couple of games, but then of course the long ACL tears. Now we get this torn pectoral muscle, and it is so disappointing. I hate to see this. Of course, Amik Robertson now has a real opportunity to kind of step into that role for the Lions with Brian Branch at safety. Again, Ifeatu Melifonwu can bring some real competition there, especially when teams are utilizing their tight ends to split out into the slot or out wide. All of a sudden, Ify's role as a big nickel becomes extremely valuable because now you can put him in that spot, maybe trust some of those matchups a little bit more, so there could be a rotation there. So the Lions, I believe, will have answers. This also really opens up that competition, because when I did my initial 53, which is over there on Bleacher Report right now, obviously it's not going to be right, but when I did my initial 53-man roster prediction, one thing for me was cornerback in terms of numbers wasn't extremely deep. I actually kept an extra safety, but the cornerbacks all kind of felt like locks. Like I had my 5. Emmanuel Moseley was part of that 5 with Amik Robertson and Enos Rakestraw and Terran Arnold and Carlton Davis, and I just rolled with those 5. Because Brian Branch can also kick down and play cornerback. And I just thought, okay, these are the locks. But now, of course, this could open up a real opportunity for someone else, whether that be Khalil Dorsey, Stephen Gilmore, Kendall Vildor.
We also not leave out the undrafted free agent out of Fresno State, Mo Norris, who's going to be a menace in the preseason, especially if he can give you some safety value
to potentially make the team now and get into that 53-man roster. It definitely opens up a spot somewhere. Maybe it's not at cornerback. Maybe it's just elsewhere. But if it does open it up at cornerback, now that competition for all of those guys, which felt very difficult to crack, even if they were all performing well, but also players that I definitely think the Lions don't want to lose. One guy out of that group seemingly could emerge into this role for the Lions here. I think that's a real possibility. I think it's on the table right now. And when I did that 53, guy that I was heavily considering was Khalil Dorsey. So I just think that's something to kind of keep an eye on. But
I said this a few times during training camp, but I felt like the Lions' biggest strength on paper was arguably their cornerback depth. The top end, we're going to have to see it. We know what Carlton is. But in terms of the depth, they had legitimate starters out there, guys that earned starting roles at times last season.
I hate this for Emmanuel Moseley, man. Hopefully it's not as serious as maybe the C.J. Gardner-Johnson situation, and hopefully at some point we're able to get him back this season. I mean, we don't have like huge updates on this as of now, but I really want to see this guy play with the Lions. I don't think this had anything to do with the unofficial depth chart having Amik Robertson above Moseley, because I believe that came out before practice. I guess it could have been after, but I believe that came out before practice. Definitely keep an eye on the Iffy situation, though, because him playing some of that slot work as that big nickel for the Lions, I think it's incredibly interesting. Obviously, Dan Campbell talked about his ability to play the run from inside the box, which was a huge value that Brian Branch brought to the table with him at safety. You don't always get that same exact impact where he's constantly near the line of scrimmage, constantly near your offensive tackle. Ifeatu Melifonwu playing in that role would get you back to that spot. He was an excellent blitzer last season. He played extremely well between the tackle blocks. I can remember all the All-22s and just be like, look at him handling blocks, and that's something that he did well in college. And testing-wise, from an athletic standpoint, he tested incredibly similar to a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson when coming out of the draft out of Florida years ago. Ifeatu Melifonwu did coming out of Syracuse for the Lions. Again, it's not your typical build. He's definitely on the bigger size, but one thing about Ifeatu Melifonwu that was always great was press balance, willingness to take on the run, to take on blocks, the success that he had there. Athletically speaking, he was always incredibly explosive. He's not the most agile cornerback, but when you play with consistent balance, you can really help make up for that. And his long speed would actually be better than guys like Brian Branch. Maybe not to the level of a guy like Emmanuel Moseley, but better than guys like Brian Branch. He does show some of that recovery ability. Plus, that long speed doesn't usually come up as much of an issue when you're in that role. As we saw last season, you could play in to help those kind of things. But having that length, he brings a lot of aspects to the table that could be effective from that role.
It could also lead to a really nice balance where you could get a very different type of piece on the field between him and, say, Amik Robertson, or I guess even an Enos or Brian Branch, depending on the matchup that you have. And don't forget with Iffy, man, he is one of the most dynamic 10-yard split players when coming out of the draft. I believe he did a sub 1.5 flat in his 10-yard split, which was incredible how fast he can close with ground in a short area. We got to see a lot of that from off-man coverage back in college, but of course that could be very valuable from the slot role.
So that's definitely something that I'm keeping my eye on now. But as for Emmanuel Moseley, man, hoping you get better. I want to see him this season for sure. I would love to see him this season. But unfortunately, it's another setback here for Moseley. So I'm going to leave it right there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Brad, for watching. We'll likely be back tonight with a live stream to talk about today's observations. It'll be late like yesterday, but tune in. Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.